Hi, I'm Catriella Friedman. I'm sitting with Jonathan Mirvis, who has been laying out a very fascinating map in terms of how the social vision entrepreneur can really be successful within the world of education. And so we have talked about a few different strategies, a couple of different strategies. Can you lay out for us a third strategy of innovation?
The two strategies I refer to, bridging and platforms, work within the context of the rules. They basically apply to what we call the micro theory of change. You may recall in the third segment, we talked about the macro theory of change. The macro theory of change basically talks about the constraints which we don't have control over. The micro theory of change relates to those steps which we are in control over and we can make them happen. So bridging is a classical example and platforms is a classical example. One of the key strategies, however, is to try and change the macro theory, change the rules of the game. This can be on two realms. The first, it can be talking about literally changing policy. It could be the policy of government. It could be the policy of federations. A second level could be what are called accepted norms. Sometimes when we talk about changing the rules of the game, it's not about the official policy, but rather about expectations.
So this sounds like a fascinating strategy and one that could be very difficult and challenging to implement. Can you take a primary example from the Jewish world of a successful implementation of changing the rules?
Okay, so I want to talk about two actually, and I mentioned both of them in my book. The first is the story of women's learning, which was developed by Sarah Schnerer, who was a seamstress. She wasn't a millionaire, she wasn't a queen, and she wasn't a great sage. She was a great lady. She believed in the importance of enabling women in traditional circles to involve themselves in serious Jewish learning. And the result of her endeavors, the beginning of the 20th century, literally hundreds of thousands of young women were attracted to Jewish learning, and the whole Beit Yaakov system, which is the flagship system of a Agudat Yisrael ultra-Orthodox community, was actually started by a seamstress, Sarah Schnerer. She changed the rules of the game. Afterwards, the rabbis came in with her, but it was she who decided to change the rules of the game. A second example is the development of birthright, which was the brainchild originally of Yossi Beilin, but in terms of implementation and bringing it from an idea, from the vision to reality, was literally the power and entrepreneurship of Charles Bronfman and Michael Steinhardt. The story of birthright and its success is basically birthright changed the rules. And it changed the rules on so many levels. Let's start. Birthright focused on the non-customer. Until this time, Jewish education investment was primarily in the customers. Jewish day schools, they'll go to Jewish camps. Birthright specifically targeted itself at the non-customers. Those who had previously been to an education experience in Israel could not qualify to go on birthright. A second change of the rules were, this is important, is that Birthright decided it was not going to run Birthright. This was done by outsourcing. Other organizations would operate in Birthright's name, as a result of which for-profit organizations run Birthright. Birthright, as I understand it, is one of the only Jewish organizations which there is a for-profit industry involved as well. Birthright changed the rules in terms of defining what could be a successful program. Until this point of time, many believed, and I was one of them, that it's impossible to take people who've never met before, who've never had an orientation, on a 10-day trip to Israel and to succeed. Birthright succeeded. A fourth area of changing the rules was the mifgash with the soldiers. Until this point of time, many groups basically saw Israel through the bus, through the window of the bus, in which basically Israel was choreographed. What Birthright decided to do is to create a bridge between Israelis and the Americans. And last but not least, and this should never be underestimated, Birthright created a precedent. Birthright is funded by 3 partners: major philanthropists, local federations, and the Israeli government. And Charles Bronfman and Michael Steinhardt basically made a challenge to the Israeli government. Would they be prepared to fund a program which would secure Jewish identity in the diaspora and would be paid by the Israeli government? This required a change of the rules. And it was Shimshon Shoshani, who then was the Director General of Birthright, who was given the job of steering this through Knesset. And ultimately it was a decision of Ehud Barak as Prime Minister and following Ariel Sharon that this was passed, ensuring that the rules would be changed.
It's fascinating because Birthright, also in terms of the way you describe it, really followed many of the steps that you've described in these segments in terms of how do you take a vision, create a macro theory of change, and implement strategies of micro theories of change and strategies of innovation.
But I must say, on this score, I have to be corrected. I was one who thought that the macro theory of change of Birthright was not strong.
Why?
Because how could someone in 10 days be highly impacted? And I was wrong. And from this, I think we should have to learn is that even though sometimes we think that macro theories are not plausible, maybe they are plausible.
So looking at your community and your organization, is there room for this kind of strategy? Is there room for changing the rules? And what kind of implementers, what kind of social entrepreneurs, what kind of leaders have the wherewithal and the ability to break those rules and change a macro theory of change into a plausible vision?